Supervisor Bottom Price, are you on the line? All right, we're live, Mr. Chair.
All right, we're gonna call the executive committee order. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
I'll move to adopt.
Second. Any discussion on the agenda? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carries. How about the minutes of the January 14th meeting? Make a motion to approve.
I'll second one there.
Any discussion on the minutes?
Yep.
Yep. All those in favor?
Aye.
Has any conflicts of interest on matters on the agenda, just bring them up. Are there any public comments?
Public comments, sir.
All right. Shall we receive any information from supervisors not seated as committee members?
Mr. Rowdy has.
What do you got, Doug?
I'm trying to unmute. The first thing I'll comment on is your sound seems to be echoing in and out. Just letting you know. I have a couple comments and they're about the agenda, and we go first and you guys are second as far as this discussion. So I might be out of line on what I have to say, but first on this sports center, I called Vince because I had very little understanding of what's going on with it. And he said it's a concept and we have to develop the concept. And I discussed that with him over the fact that you're reaching out to municipalities with a concept. So at the end of our discussion, I told him I'm not in favor of this. And he didn't sell me on the idea. So feeling like I was so out of the loop, I contacted other supervisors to see if they knew more than I did, and they were as much in the dark as I am. But out of our discussion with phone calls and emails, not one of the other supervisors was in favor of this project. So that's just a heads up to let you guys know what's going on. My other comment has to do, I'd like to address this to Malia, and it has to do with the Polk County Rules of Order ordinance. And shouldn't we be attempting to follow that closer? I don't know if Malia is even there. But I read your agenda, and there's a couple items on there that I am unsure of whether you are sending them to another committee or you're discussing them in the executive committee, because they're not supposed to be discussed at your committee. If you go by the rules of order, you're supposed to address them to another committee. So I'll have to watch the meeting now and see what happens. And especially there's one on CAFOs that should be going back to the appropriate committee. Then the meth discussion, that should be sent back to appropriate committee. So I'd like to know who enforces the rules of order, or what we even have them for. So I'll let you go for now. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Any other supervisors like to comment?
Thank you. I think kind of maybe I'm here because I noticed this CAFO agenda on there, but I'm not here to talk about CAFOs. I'm here to talk about the process. That seems to be a pattern that's a concerning pattern to me, which is since sort of August, September, I've noticed that other committees have things taken out of their committee and brought to this committee. For whatever reason, maybe I won't even surmise on that, but I have noticed it 3 times. And one was the first in the late summer, the CUP wasn't done in the Environmental Services Committee. They had still been working on it, still were working through their voting. And all of a sudden it shows up in executive, gets voted on, and then goes to the full board in September for our vote. That was one piece. And then the other piece was the other day when Gen Gov, when Supervisor Duncanson brings the ethics piece to Gen Gov, which would arguably be the right committee, it gets moved to here. And then the third piece was this operation ordinance piece I think Doug is referring to, and that is all of a sudden the Operation CAFO piece ends up in this committee when we're still working on it in Health and Human. We're actively doing stuff with it. We don't have a meeting this month, but I think that committee should be, I think all the committees should be allowed to finish their work before executive steps in. So it's a process issue to me. I don't know where that fits in the rules of order that we have an executive committee that can just step into another committee and take away something that people are working on. And then lastly, the piece, just from a kind of, I don't know what it is, respect for people's time, what it does is it makes the rest of us supervisors have to chase around something that we're working on in our committee. So for example, Health and Human, I have to come and say, well, actually, no, we're still working on CAFOs, and Supervisor Duncanson from Gen Gov has to come and say, well, no, I wanted to do executive and now I have to follow it here. So it's a process issue, and I think we should have a larger discussion at the board level to clarify sort of the role of executive, because in the past it's been very minimal. You know, it's been once in a while, if maybe there's a conflict, you know, a handful of times a year at the most, and now it's become almost a policy directing committee. And so I think the full board should get clarity on that and have this discussion. And, you know, I don't know, we do job descriptions between Gen Gov and executive. Those two committees seem to overlap a lot, but I think we need some clarity around this issue. So thanks for your time.
Anyone else?
Sure. I just want to comment on the potential sports and ag complex. I don't know enough about it to say whether I would be in favor of it or not in favor of it. But I do have a concern that before it's addressed by any county committee or any county action or any county officials, I think it's highly premature to be sending letters out to municipalities about an issue that the county hasn't even officially addressed yet. I think it's a little early to try to drum up support from other municipalities. I think the first concern should be drumming up support amongst the supervisors and amongst the appropriate county officials before we start reaching out to other municipalities about it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any announcements or committee information? I think we have an appointment to the emergency fire wardens.
Oh, for the fire wardens, yes, this is just a appointments that come up, both Gene Smith and Mike Stoddard, as well as Ronaldo and Gallardo have been the fire wardens, and they want to continue doing that, so it's appropriate, I think, for this committee to know about it. I don't think there's any vote needs to be taken.
Anyone want to comment on it? If not, we'll have some discussion and possible action regarding a recommendation on Supervisor Warrenball's appointment to the vacancy in the Wisconsin West Central Regional Planning.
Yeah, so Russ, that's mine. Joe Demling asked to step down from that committee due to the fact that it's all online, and he just says, I'm not doing the meetings, I can't do it. And so I talked to Joe and discussed with him about options for filling that spot, and talked to Tracy too. She's currently on that committee, and so we thought Warrendall would be a good recommendation. I talked to Steve, and he's willing to do that. So I was just, again, it's an appointment. I just want to bring it to the board committee here to just let you know that I'll be making that appointment at the county board. He's accepted it.
Not? Be the county board. Who's gonna lead us in a discussion of possible action regarding the operational ordinance on cable?
That would be me apparently, so I got here just in time. Chair, I got a question on this topic here. You know, Russ, you know, Doug Rowdy's here. He brought up the CAFO issue. Amy did. I just would like to make sure, can we have, since they are on Health and Human Services and they, you know, would it be proper for them to join in this discussion since it may be a big discussion? Just putting that out there for you, that you would consider that. I'm assuming they probably may want to, if there's dialogue here, do we allow that or do we not?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we probably could.
Since we don't know what actually is going to be discussed.
Yeah, and if any action is taken, I mean, they couldn't be part of any, because it says discussion of possible action.
Sure.
They couldn't be any part of the action. Or yours.
Okay. So,
Maybe before we start, maybe you could address why it's at this committee. We had a question on that earlier, why this committee would be discussing a CAFO at all. Could you maybe shed a little light on that?
as much as anything, because the chairmans of all the committees sit here. And realistically, it could go to several committees. It could be a general government, it could be Health and Human Services, it could be an environmental services. Realistically, at the end of the day, I think CAFO issues, because they're agriculturally related, probably need to be at environmental services more than anywhere else. So I think, you know, this committee has the chairmans of, or in my case, the vice chair with Supervisor O'Connell out, of every committee sitting on it. And I think 3 of the 4 at least standing committees, this could realistically be in front of, for discussion.
All right, so we're not debating which committee it should be in front of. You just have information for this committee.
Yeah, and then whatever this committee, I guess, wants to, you know, whatever this committee feels as though should move on, maybe that's something, maybe it's nothing, maybe it's say, send it to another committee. But I believe we're at a point where the county needs to either decide that we need to spend a pile of money. Having sent the operational ordinance to the state, DATCAP has sent back and said, you need to do, realistically, if you look at DATCAP's response, everything in it is wrong for the most part, everything that really matters. February 6th, Environmental Services Corporation Counsel LOSO spoke to us, you know, and said it was very unlikely that the county has statutory authority to impose bonding. That's a big portion of an operational ordinance. And if we're going to go down this road, the first thing we have to do is prove that there is a difference between swine manure and any other type of manure that's running down the hill. That's going to take studies, that's going to take money, that's going to take time, it's going to take, I think, years and years and years to prove that before we can move forward to decide that if the county is going to impose stricter regulations, they have to be local. We can't look at studies from Iowa, North Carolina, Germany, and say, this is why we're imposing these regulations, and they have to be scientifically defensible to do that. And operational ordinances rely heavily upon public and private nuisances, in which in statute 82308, agriculture is virtually exempt from a public or a private nuisance. And I just think that the county board needs to decide where we're going with this, or a committee or multiple committees or whoever it is, and say, are we willing to spend taxpayer dollars to keep going down this rabbit hole that the state's not going to allow us anyway, because everything we do, if we do anything over and above state regulations, we're going to need to prove it scientifically and locally. And how much money do we want to spend on it when I believe we have a lot bigger issues in front of us than swine CAFOs? And the other thing is are we willing to put these restrictions on all other livestock if our study comes back and says, yeah, dairy waste, poultry waste, any other kind of animal waste is equally as likely to pollute water when it runs down that hill into it? Are we then willing to say, oh, hey, dairy, we're going to regulate you harder. We're going to regulate poultry harder. We're going to regulate everybody harder. And then once we've said that, are we willing to go outside of agriculture? Staff and environmental services will tell you that I think we should outlaw lawn mowing because the DNR has proved that it is hugely damaging to water. So are we willing to go that far? Or do we just want to pick on agriculture and say, oh no, here's the bad guy? Because trust me, there's lots and lots of bad guys out there. And are we going to try and take care of every possible piece of pollution? Because as we all drove here today, we were all part of the problem. And so I just think if we're going to keep going down this road, we're going to need to amend the 2021 budget to say, here it is, we're going to throw a whole bunch of money at studies. And if we're not, then we probably need to quit spending staff time, who is, I believe, very, very burned out on this issue, and willing for it and ready for it to end. Or are we just going to try and regulate agriculture harder, in which the state is not going to allow us to do at the end of the day anyway? Good question, Ross. So, yeah, I think this committee, and I'll go back to Supervisor Middleton bringing it up, what is this committee's role, right? And our committee, I believe, is to deal with conflicts with other committees. So one of the questions about why, this and it goes back to operational ordinance, which Supervisor Middleton said, why did we get involved? Well, we got involved because we had two committees earlier this year kind of going down different paths, right? One said, hey, we're working on this, one's doing this, and they weren't on the same page, clearly. We saw that was a problem. It is the executive committee's role to deal with those kind of issues. And we realized that, I'm glad we got involved because we actually got protection in Polk County now with a CUP. And if we would have just let it go, it's very possible that CUP or the moratorium didn't get voted through, and we would have had no protection in Polk County. So, that's clearly why you have to understand, Supervisor Middleton, you're new at this, that, when a certain committee is not getting their job done, somebody else steps in and tries to put some protection in place. So I completely go against everything you made your comments about, because you're totally wrong. Now, we are here for conflicts of committees. As the chair, I hear the same discussion. I certainly would want administrator and maybe corporation counsel and Chad to get involved, but clearly I hear that our staffs are overwhelmed. We have COVID. We have a lot of issues going on in this county. And this is one of these things that everyone wants to keep kicking the can. And you got two committees. I recommended Brad too to bring this to this committee. You get two committees working on something and they're not getting nothing done. To be honest with you, they ask a question one meeting and they get a question answered, and then they ask staff to do something else again. I've been paying attention to this. So I think it's appropriate for our committee to give some direction when committees are kind of not sure what they're doing. And I'd certainly like to, personally, I'd like to hear from staff on this idea that we keep this going? And does the health department have the resources to keep, and the staff to keep working on this? And does Environmental Services Division have the resources to keep working on this? My sense is they don't. And so that's my 2 cents.
So me and Supervisor Middleton had a conversation last night, and please correct me if you think I'm wrong on this, Amy. She said the push behind this was to protect the unzoned towns, because, you know, they have no protection through our CUP process. I sit on the board of an unzoned town. We don't want Polk County zoning. We don't want an operational ordinance. I'm pretty sure I could say the same thing for the town of Lorraine. There's a reason we're unzoned, because we don't want zoning. We don't want the county, and we certainly don't want, at least in the 2 townships up north, we certainly don't want the operational ordinance shoved down our throat, because that's what's going to happen. And as far as trying to protect an unzoned town can get protection that fast. All they need to do is put it on their agenda and vote to join county zoning, and they have protection of everything within the zoning ordinances. So it isn't like they have no choice. I mean, we could have voted last night at the Clam Falls Town Board meeting to join county zoning, and we would have had the protection of everybody else. We have no interest in it. We have no interest in being in county zoning. We have no interest in having an operational ordinance shoved down our throat by the county. And so to say that this is to protect the unzoned towns, the unzoned towns want to be protected. And if they do, join zoning. It's as simple as that. It's a simple majority vote by the town board to enter into county zoning, and you have the protections that are there.
Supervisor Bonneprice.
Yes, I've been on the WebEx, hooked up with the WebEx since 20 after, but they haven't got me hooked up in Balsam Lakes. So I'm on 2 phones. I'm listing on one phone. I have a new phone. I'm listing on one phone, but I would like to have them hook me up there on the WebEx.
You're on the WebEx, sir. There's a little bit of background coming through music or something. I just gonna let you know, everybody can hear you.
Yeah, there's music playing on the WebEx, and it says continue to hold on that one. I'm live on the other phone.
Yeah, hang
what's
up.
your
Hang up the one that's playing music. We'll still be able to hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Arizona music.
I
There we
just,
go.
I just want to make a warning that with all of the supervisors that are here and by WebEx, we do have a quorum of the county board. And so unfortunately, because of that, I would limit the conversation to just the committee to avoid an issue. Right now with adding those 3, Doug, Sharon, and Bonneprice, and then the 2 extras we have here, that is a quorum.
Can I just say one thing, just a piece of information? Would that be okay?
Yeah, I mean,
I think we just got an opinion from the attorney. We got to be careful. I would.
just right, to very much limit and not open it up. Only because right now you have a meeting of the board if you were to do that.
Even though our
Yeah,
agenda,
I'm listening live. And
even though our agenda says the quorum of the county board may be present, but we've allowed them to participate is what your
Right.
concern is.
Right.
All right, a brief comment.
Well, I would just remind us that we, in September, the board already took up this issue when we passed that resolution that said, and it was an amendment that said, and the operation ordinance will be continued in Health and Human. So we already had a board discussion on that, and it just seems like we're not letting that process finish. And I have to say, we are working on it in Health and Human, and there is progress moving. And, you know, it can get voted down, But it feels like it should be a bundle and a package on the top of the bow that we finish what we said we were going to do and then deliver it, and people can vote it down or not, but just to have that process finished is important to me.
Could someone from staff, Vince, could you tell us what the package of the bow looks like and when it would get wrapped up then?
Well,
Can you give our committee what the county staff is struggling with? I think that'd be important for other people to hear.
well, first of all, I mean, just to clarify, as staff, you set the policy, and whatever that policy is, we do. So we're not saying we can't do it. We're always busy. So I just want to make that clear. We will follow the policy. What we did since September was put together kind of a model or an example operational ordinance to send it to DATCAP so that we could get their feedback as to the legality and the administrative burden that it would require to get this thing through. With their feedback, senior staff, environmental services, and health and human services, and our legal department, and myself looked at it and assessed, is this something that we can do? And there are some problems that we see with the operational ordinance in that legally, we think it would be challenged and could be easily challenged. And then secondly, administratively, to do the studies in a local fashion. If it's a study that's nationwide or worldwide that talks about swine manure, for example, that would be something for the state. And the state set rules and regulations based on that information. What the state is saying is if you're going to do something locally that's going to affect CAFOs on a local basis, you have to show specific things locally of why you have to make it like this or tougher. That would require additional staff. It would require studies, which we got qualified people, but in fact, we probably would want to hire some outside people to do studies locally. It would take time. And at the end of the day, the question is, would we still be challenged legally? We don't see an easy path forward. Doesn't mean we can't go that way. If that policy is we do it, we do it. But we thought it's important for people to know that this is a tough road to hoe.
Can you be specific on what the resolution says we were supposed to be doing that we actually passed at the board? And have we fulfilled that resolution, I think is the question that Supervisor Olson's asking, right?
Well, yes, because we've sent it to the state. The state has sent back what they believe to be wrong with the resolution. That realistically, we just copied and pasted.
An ordinance, you mean?
An ordinance, yes. And so they've sent it back and said, here's what's wrong. But we're not doing anything that I've seen out of Health and Human Services to move forward and say, okay, here it is. To me, the very first thing that CAP said we have to do is if you're going to separate swine from other livestock, it is our burden to show the state that when swine manure runs into water, it's going to affect that water differently than any other type of waste, be that animal waste, human waste, and it's going to be worse, and it's going to cause that pollution in different ways. So until we prove that, we can't even, it doesn't even pay to go down the road of saying, okay, now we have to spend untold thousands of dollars doing local studies to make it more restrictive than the state is. Until we have decided that we're going to prove that swine waste is different and pollutes in a different way, we can talk about it all day long and for years, and yet we're still going to be at that same spot of we have to spend money to prove something that more than likely we can't prove to a scientifically defensible fact, that swine manure pollutes water in a different way.
What does the resolution say? I mean, I know it doesn't talk about swine.
Well, the last be resolved statement is now be it further resolved that the Environmental Services Committee be directed to continue its work to refine the amended Polk County Comprehensive Use Ordinance enacted hereby as it pertains to swine CAFOs, and the Health and Human Services Board is directed to continue its work on an operational CAFO ordinance, each for future consideration by the Polk County Board of Supervisors.
It says for them to work on it.
Yes.
Right. So they've been working on it. So we have the chair of Health and Human Services. He's on the phone. Chair, may I ask John a question?
I'm here if you have any questions.
Maybe direct it to Malia instead of me.
Okay.
Your question.
So Malia, my question is listening to that resolution, knowing that two committees have been working on it, when did that resolution get passed? September, October, November, December, January, we're February, 5 months after that resolution passed. Committees have been working on it, we understand. What does that actually mean? Because I know that was an amendment done by, I think, Mr. Pritchard at the night of that meeting. We made that amendment to that original resolution. Have we fulfilled that resolution requirement? How do you deal with that?
Well, I think everyone has made a good faith effort to work on the operations ordinance. And now I think the issue is that staff from various departments were saying, we feel like to go to where we would need to be in order to bring something defensible to the full board would require a significant amount of resources. And that's where I think staff is asking for policy direction. Do you want us to keep going in that direction, or can we put our attention on other things?
And that's where I'll come back, because that's where I believe the county board needs to decide. That's why this is in front of us today. I mean, we got the response back from DATCAP on the 15th of October saying what was wrong with the ordinance. So we're sitting here today and moving forward, and even most of the last several months, really with nowhere to go other than to follow the guidance of DATCAP. And that the first and most important thing from DATCAP, maybe not the most important, but the first thing is the differentiation between swine manure and any other type of waste. And that's going to be up to this county to prove. And if we don't prove it, then is this county board willing to say, okay, we want to put more restrictions on everybody out there? Because when the moratorium was first passed, it was passed on swine because no one wanted to affect somebody who was in business today. We have no swine producers in business today. We certainly have dairy producers and poultry producers in our county. But we didn't want to affect anybody who was in business today. So if we're going to throw dairy and poultry in there, then are we willing to affect those people who are in business, those family farms who are in business today? And if not, are we willing to spend the money to go do those studies? To me, if this is going to move forward in any fashion for an end result, it's going to take an amendment to the 2021 budget to find that money to go do those, to start doing those studies. Because without those studies and without that information, we can talk about this for the next 20 years, but we're not going to have any scientifically defensible evidence to move forward with. I believe we're years away from anywhere from having an ordinance, and we're hundreds of thousands of dollars away from having an ordinance that will stand up and be approved by DATCAP. And that's if everything goes the way that the individuals who want the operational ordinance, if everything falls their way, it will still take years. It will take hundreds of thousands of dollars, I believe.
So should we, before we just keep continuing the discussion, I mean, should this be moved to county board? I mean, should this committee ask the entire board, what do you want to do? Or where do we proceed from here? Other than,
Chairman Russ, may I make a comment? Chairman Russ, may I make
He's on the committee.
He's on the committee.
oh, of course, John. And you asked if you could ask John a question.
Yeah, I think you
will
said-
ask Malia.
Yeah, right, I thought,
Maybe
okay.
ask Malia if John could respond.
Oh, sure.
And yeah, he's not sitting here, it's hard to say. Go ahead,
may I
John.
make a comment? Russ?
Yeah, yeah.
We brought this up on our county association steering committee, and we're having another conference call at 10 o'clock on March 11th, and I'm sure we'll be talking about this. But the Wisconsin Counties Association has felt that steadfastly we've had all the protection from the state of Wisconsin through DATCAP and other regulations, all the way down to our permitting process at Baldwin, that we're very well protected. They're still working on it, but I think we're very well protected to go forward from now on. Thank you.
Russ, I'd like to add one final comment too. I talked to township officials in Eureka, and they've been engaged since this whole issue with swine CAFOs, you know, and I'd say just about everyone, most people don't want a swine CAFO coming to Polk County. There may be a few, there might even be one guy in the room that don't care, but I'm going to say most people don't want it, right? So County Eureka, which I think is doing a good job, they are actually in the middle of getting their a CUP in place too as a township. And talking to them, they're also going to talk to the unzoned townships to say, here's why we got under county zoning. And they feel like with their CUP in place, it'd be a model for other townships to, if they want that extra level of protection and just not the county, because we have a CUP now in place. So we have a public process in place if a swine CAFO wants to come. And I agree, the idea of the unzoned townships needing us to protect them, like Brad said, you know, if they want protection, they should join county zoning. It's that simple. And for us to drag the county down this hole of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and years of time to protect an unzoned township like Clam Falls says, we don't want you. I think there's a better process out there that if these townships get their CUPs in place, and I would encourage Environmental Services Department to reach out to the unzoned townships to say, hey, here's the process if you want under county zoning, and then encourage them to work with a town like Eureka that is going to put their own CUP in place and say, because then you could have a CUP in place at the town level, then you'd have a CUP in place at the county level. I agree. I think the committees have done their job. And I think Health and Human Services has done their job, and Environmental have. They sent it off to DADCAP. You guys have kicked the can for 5 months. You haven't brought nothing back to us to say, hey, here's what we got. Here's where we're going. And I don't know that the resolution requires us to bring it back to the county board. When I just heard the resolution, it says, hey, keep working on it. Well, you worked on it for a while. I think the question really to me in my mind is, who says we're done working on it, right? Because we just said work on it. We didn't say, hey, create an ordinance and we're going to pass it. It just said work on it. So there's nothing that says you got to bring it back to the board. Or is there?
I think the language in the resolution says work on the operations ordinance for consideration by the county board.
It does say that specifically?
Yes.
For future consideration by the Polk County Board of Supervisors.
Okay, so how does that play out? Because it seems like that's the question is, we're spinning our wheels. Sounds like the committee chair of Health and Human Services, hey, we're comfortable with it. Environmental Services chair says, we're fine with it. How does something end?
Well, I think that's why Supervisor Arcan's question of, should we have the county board tell us, we're done for now.
So our committee can just make a recommendation to send this issue to the county board? Is that what you're thinking, Jay?
Well,
You had your hand up.
I was thinking of something else.
Oh,
You were correct in one thing, that these two committees have not accomplished anything. They certainly have.
right.
They've got me thoroughly confused. The, as to which direction we are there. But I certainly believe, are we standing alone in this, in the state of Wisconsin, to challenge any other? Ours happen to be swine. Are we alone in this? Has anybody ever checked with, I think John mentioned the Counties Association. I don't know that they've ever been confronted by this issue. And as far as we've gone, it appears to me that we are the only ones that have any input in the state of Wisconsin, whether we want to restrict anything in this respect. I understand this, and Brad's absolutely right. If we, I've been in a number of court challenges on various things over the years, and we're talking a long time to get anything resolved. If this is exactly what we're going to have to do in standing alone in Polk County, I don't think we can afford to go down that road. I think you're absolutely right. But
Well,
as far as going back to the county board, I would assume we're going to have to do something relatively soon, one way or another, whether to continue the investigation to see if we can conjure up somebody else to help us in that respect, maybe one of the associations or something. But if we're standing alone in this, I'm concerned about the financial impact.
Brad, you have something? I'm trying to get in.
No, that's all right. I mean, yeah. We're not the only ones that have looked at this operational ordinance. We're the first municipality to actually send it to the state of Wisconsin and say, what's your feedback on this proposed ordinance? I mean, we can pass it as it is today as the county. And if we're never challenged, we'll be perfectly fine. But as soon as we're challenged, we're going to be paying, and we're going to be paying in a big way. So if we're going to do it, I believe we need to do it right. We don't need to just say, well, we're going to pass it, and a hog CAFO will probably never come to Polk County, and it will probably never matter. But on the day that one does, it's going to matter a lot to the future taxpayers of Polk County if one comes. And I get it, I understand it. I get everything in it. It's simply putting enough roadblocks in front of a business to try to keep it out of your county because you don't want it. But the state says that isn't legal in agriculture. It isn't legal in any other business either. To put roadblocks up to make it harder to get in. And so I guess that's my point. If we're going to keep moving forward, we have to decide if we're going to keep moving forward and how much money we're going to spend over the next several years doing studies, realizing that the risk could be that we don't get the answers that the operational ordinance needs to move forward. Or maybe we get all the answers that it needs, and the state says, yeah, we don't agree with your scientific evidence. How much time we've spent? We've spent almost 2 years on this now as a county. We've spent a boatload of time. We've spent who knows how much staff hours with a year ago zoning being a mile behind in permits because of this. And we passed something in September, and by November, Health and Human Services was looking at a resolution that would have tried to study all types of CAFOs. That was eventually pulled, not just swine CAFOs, but all CAFOs. So at what point do we pretty much say, like other counties have, we're done? Or we're going to spend an unlimited amount of money to go forward. But we need to decide if we're done or if we're going to spend that unlimited amount of money, because otherwise we can put it on the Health and Human Services agenda. We can put it on every agenda, on every committee on this county, but we're still getting nowhere until we find out the one true answer. Start this process is swine waste different than any other waste when it hits water? It makes pollution. So does every other animal waste or human waste. It makes pollution when it hits.
Can I make a quick comment?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I'll guarantee you that this will never be put to rest, because every 3 months we will have some comments on the county's steering committee. I believe that Dane, I think it's Dane County and Stock County. I think there's a couple counties that are probably ahead of us in some of the research, and it's always brought up every 3 months on the Human Services Steering Committee. Thank you.
All right, so I think everything is leading to the board needs to make a decision on where we go from here. Do we keep it in committees and keep utilizing staff time? Or are we gonna finance it? Or are we just gonna end it and quit talking about it? I think the board has to make that call. We can't make it. This committee can. Full committee can.
Right.
How do we get that done?
Well, if the chairman would like it placed on, I guess, March county board?
Sure, put it on the county, put it on the board and let's talk if that's where it needs to be. Clearly, there's supervisors on both sides of the issue that want to talk about it, and we can't talk about it all here today. Let's talk about it at the next county board and put it on the agenda.
All right. That's what we'll do.
We're not amending our current agenda now, right? There's nothing else being placed on it. This county board meeting, right?
For February?
Yeah.
I don't-
If there's an amendment being done, I would say then put it on there. I mean, it's like, let's talk about it, but
See if we could do it in February.
we're not gonna do it, in February, then do it in March.
We have time to amend them for February agenda.
I mean, it would be an amended agenda.
Whatever you guys wanna do, I don't care.
All right. How about a discussion regarding consideration of possible development of county ethics policy for county officials? Could this be in another committee other than this one? Are we working on this? Or is this the right committee?
Well, that was, Chair, that was a recommendation, not by our committee, as Ms. Middleton said, that we took this thing away from general government. It wasn't that we took it away from general government, that was mischaracterization of what happened. Ethics for something like this, Corporation Council said it needs to be done in this committee. So I want to correct the record on that, Ms. Middleton. So that's why it came to this committee, because Fran sits on general government. We brought it up with general government. General government just deals with financing. We don't deal with ethics. So it was said executive committee deals with ethics, right?
Correct. This committee is the ethics committee. That's in the rules of order. I think where the confusion lies is because the general government director brought a personnel policy and a finance policy to general government, which is appropriate. And so when you think about a personnel policy, that of course should go into general government. But when you're talking about ethics for elected and appointed officials, that's not general government. That's clearly in your rules of order, this committee, the executive committee.
We should consider which committee would be the best determination of what ethics is and what standard they're going to go by. I think if you went to every different committee, you would find it's in ethics. That's a pretty broad word in order to control it in any manner.
Is there an ethics policy
So we have a resolution passed in 2013 that covers ethics of supervisors. We have the county personnel policies, which were amended and readopted this past year, that tie employees to the state ethics laws. But what we don't have is anything that addresses appointed, like appointed positions and that kind of stuff. So boards and commissions, and that's where the gap is. Your resolution covers supervisors, the personnel policies cover the employees, but you've got the gap for the appointed persons.
Well, just so we don't keep, talking about it, why wouldn't we just say that they have to fall under the same policy we fall under?
My point.
Same ethics. And have this committee send a resolution to county board that's what it's gonna be. And
So-
let the board
So
vote.
would we just amend the 2013 resolution to include appointed and unpaid positions?
We could, but there are a couple of things that I think Chad found in other counties. For example, adding something in the code of ethics for supervisors and appointed officials to include keeping confidential information that comes from a closed session confidential, putting that right in the ethics policy so it is 100% clear. Something like that would be very helpful. Because that really isn't addressed. Most of the ethics that's codified in statute talks about, financial interests and that kind of thing, and making sure that you're keeping things appropriate when it comes to any, financial ties a supervisor might have. But the idea of having a few other things, I think that Chad and Vince and I could sit down and come up with some recommendations.
So, excuse me, what you're saying is that you think we should expand upon our ethics policy as it stands today for everybody, not only.
I just liked some of the language, because one of the things that, we talked about at one of the
Right.
county boards was the idea of closed session information and having it put right in a policy so that if a supervisor or an appointed official violated their ethical obligation, they could be, censured or something like that.
How about if we just have staff bring us back a revamped copy of the 2013 one to go to the county board?
And should that come to this committee, or is it the direction of this committee that go to another committee?
Just take it right to the board. Why do we need to kick it around? If it's an ethics for everything, or do we want to kick it around and look at it
I think
again?
we need a 2/3 if we took it right to the board.
Yeah, so I'd rather have it come back to this committee with a draft and then the committee send it, if that's okay. I know it kind of stretches out the timeline.
But what you're
We
doing,
can do it by March.
what you're doing is tweaking the whole ethics
Yeah, getting a draft. and having-
resolution we have in,
Yeah, basically, we would add a couple whereas clauses, therefores, and add these areas that
and then
would
include the,
appointed officials, the
Appointed
closed
officials,
sessions, things like that. I didn't have an immense amount of time, but I was able to find a couple of examples where appointed officials were covered, and then there were some things that ours don't include that I thought were interesting. But if we had another month, we could definitely bring something together for minutes.
All right, so is it the consensus of this board that that's the path we take on the ethics policy? All right.
don't forget Johnny.
I think you would have commented. All right.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, John. We're gonna move on to and then, this might be another one here. We have discussion and possible action regarding methamphetamine epidemic. And why is it in this committee? We had asked for I thought we had asked for an update on cost, like we were getting on COVID. I didn't know that we were gonna take any action.
I don't think, I agree that this committee shouldn't take any action, but I think, again, is this, who who sends things to committees or say, hey, committee, we need to have this on. And I think this was one of those that made our top 4 list of priorities for the county. And to me personally, I certainly would like to see Health and Human Services and all the committees at the board, public safety, we have video of a guy selling meth right out in our parking lot here a couple months ago, making a drug deal with undercover deputies. That's how, what's the word, brazen? That's how much people don't even care the consequences anymore in our community. And to me, I think as an executive committee member, I would like to send this message to the other committees that although CAFOs is an important issue, our meth epidemic is worse than our COVID epidemic in Polk County. And we spend all these resources this year on COVID. And so I just wanted the executive committee to at least discuss it, make sure it's being put on the right committee's agendas. It's not our job to work on it in executive.
So the direction was given to me at the last executive meeting to come up with a suggested work plan for the executive to direct to the other committees. So I did come up with a suggestion, if you guys want to hear that, as far as how each committee would hear this or what work they would do on it. Because that's the direction that was given to me last month. And so, I think it's a very valid point because public safety and substance abuse are your number 1 and number 2 budget priorities. And we should be updating the committees as to the budget priorities. So a supposed work plan that I came up with is, and I would have to work with the sheriff and public health to see which month they wanted, but in March, Public Safety and Public Works would hear a presentation by the sheriff's office regarding the current drug trends and public safety impacts. And they'd hear a presentation by the CJCC coordinator on local, state, and national trends in the CJCC. In April, Health and Human Services would receive a presentation by behavioral health on the current substance abuse trends and programs being offered and what they're doing with it. In May, General Government Committee would get a presentation by administration regarding resource allocation to substance abuse and public safety priorities. And then in June, this committee would get a summarized presentation by administration of the trends, initiatives, and resource allocations towards those budget priorities. Thinking being, the direction from this committee last month was how we want this to stay, a relevant topic that we continue to discuss. And also they are your 2 budget priorities. So if we structured them that way in the work plan, then when you guys get to budget time in July and you start thinking about where you're going to put resources, you have the information. The meth initiative is a multidisciplined initiative. It's not one that really can rest in any one committee because the behavioral health impact of it is a huge part. The public safety impact of it is a huge part. So that's just my suggestion, and if that's what the committee wants, then I'll work with the committee chairs to get it on their work plans and work with the department heads to set the schedule.
Anyone opposed to that, or is that the direction we should be heading?
Yeah, I'm all for heading in that direction.
I'm good with that.
John?
I believe meth is our 24/7 epidemic.
Well, we're gonna take that as a yes.
Yeah.
We're gonna say then that we have consensus here to move forward with that plan.
All right.
Get them in them committees and eventually it'll get back here for a follow-up to make sure it got done. Did you want to give us the cost? We had asked for that.
Yeah, what I gave you is just, this is very rough because this is a much deeper issue. It takes longer to analyze, but this is just roughly, I communicated with behavioral health, the sheriff's office, and then CJCC. And these are the rough costs of what each department spent regarding methamphetamine in 2020. Behavioral health was 111,000 and change. The sheriff's office and it's just between jail operations for housing, and then their 2 narcotics investigators and their vehicles is about 1.5 million. And that's staff and all that and all these. And then CJCC, it probably accounts for about 85% of CJCC activities, and that's 125,000. So just those, without breaking out courts and all, because I didn't have time for all that, is about 1.75 million in 2020 that's attributable to methamphetamine.
And I think you'd see a big chunk from
Right.
child protection,
If
out of
it,
home placements, all of that stuff.
you know, by May, by the time I have time to really get with everybody, you know, we'd incorporate corporation counsel cost and CPS cost, clerk of the courts cost, DA's cost. But you, kind of a benchmark number was requested, so this is the benchmark we kind of came up with. Picking in a hurry.
Does the federal government reimburse for any of them costs?
We get, so CJCC gets some through their TAD funding. Behavioral health, we recover through the charges to insurance and that kind of stuff, some of it. The sheriff's office, very minimal grants. We get about $30,000 a year from the drug task force grant, 30 to 30,000. Not much reimbursement for the law enforcement side for the cost of dealing with methamphetamine. Once you get into the courts and all that, there's some small grants in there, some small recoveries for restitution and all. But this is an area where there's not a lot of cost recovery. It's a drain on public services, without a doubt.
Mostly Polk County taxpayers.
Exactly. This is a direct impact. But by May, that gives me time to pull together a better comprehensive report for the general government.
Ted, through child placement and a lot of other things in the health and human services, there's a lot of unseen costs that really mount up.
They do. It'll be, I think it'll be very eye-opening if we use this approach and each committee looks at how it deals with their area of expertise.
I got a question, Chair.
Yep.
So Chad, is the goal, it's one thing to say, okay, we spend a lot of money. Okay, we can just say that, right? It's a lot of money. And we probably haven't captured it all here, but you know, I would like to see the county board's job as, you know, obviously departments are working on this every day. This is a daily issue. Everyone's working hard on it. And you can only do so much, obviously. When you got people showing up here that don't care, you know, they just clearly do not care about, you know, following the law and selling drugs in front of the building. But, you know, to me, I think of what kind of tools, what do you need from the county board? That's what I'd encourage departments to say, hey, you know, we got the staff, we got the money, but we need a new tool, right? I need a new screwdriver, I need a new saw, I need a new ladder. What are the tools, or what can the county board do more than just keep throwing money at it? And I hope that's what comes out of this.
And I think it will. I think if we use this kind of update and informational procedure, and then you top it off in June with exec, then in July, when you guys and ladies start looking at the budgets and you get the requests from the departments about these are the additions we'd like, these are the tools we need,
Okay.
these are the initiatives, then I think as legislators, you guys have the appropriate information to decide, yeah, we like the direction that these resources are being used to fight methamphetamine, we'll increase them. Or we don't like that, we want to shift, the resource allocation this way, because that's how the board, you know, institutes its policy as far as which direction they want us to go is in our budget request. So my idea is if you do this shortly before budget time, then when you get the budget request, you guys have the information to make the best decisions for the budget.
So when we work on this and they work on committees, you have CJCC here and you have behavioral health sheriff. Malia talked about the department that you ran, right?
Child welfare.
Child welfare. But I think too of like the district attorney's office and the judges, you know, they're not on this list. Clearly, a lot of that starts with, you know, I think of the process of meth, right? You're selling meth out here in the parking lot, you get arrested. So the cops have done their job, they've taken the guy to jail. You know, and he's a habitual offender. He's got a record this stacked. Everyone else can do all the things they do all day long, but how do we include, just instead of just going, and maybe it is through CJCC, but how does that message get sent across the road to the district attorney's office and to the judges? Is it just through a budget process? Is that how are you going to work them into being part of solving the problem.
Well, I mean, I can absolutely ask them if when we, I could ask the DA's office, do you want to present to public safety the same month the
Sure.
sheriff does? And we can do that.
Okay.
They're an elected official, so we can't, as administration, say, we need you to present. But we can
could
absolutely ask them. Or you could always invite them as a committee.
I just think it's so important that they are part of this process, that they just don't just sit over there and, and I know they've got other issues, but I just think it's important that everyone that touches this issue, they're involved somehow.
And there may be, as I talk to the department heads in the areas, it may be, well, we also think this person should be involved in a presentation. Health and Human Services, I got to be honest, I can think of like 5 departments that should probably.
Sure.
That I don't know if they want. I know Lisa Lavasser, the director of behavioral health, really liked the idea of talking to the committee about what they're seeing. So it may be that, Child Protective Services wants to update, or it may be that Tanya decides to do it a different way. But I mean, I can work on the work plan so that we can get all those voices done.
Well, I think our biggest challenge from the county board for a deterrent is education in our schools and our workplaces. Because once the big challenge in meth is one time and you're done, it's too late, you're hooked. So our education through schools, different youth organizations, maybe churches, community things, and even in our workforces, there's a deterrent for to stay away from the one-time shot deal.
And I will say that is the piece where the CJCC does play a pivotal role, because the CJCC is the organization that brings United Way and economic development, all those, and Salvation Army together. And I think that's the arm of the county that has the best source of information.
They do.
Bring all those outside groups together to talk at the table. That's the purpose of it.
If you recall last year with the CJCC, with the previous folks who ran that, one of the challenges was we didn't have a consistent goal across the whole organization. And I think now with the new coordinator, with the new group that's working together, the key is to get everybody working on the same outcome, reducing the issue, reducing crime associated with it, getting people recovered, and if they're not going to recover, put them in jail or whatever. But 2 years ago, it seemed like you had different factions of CJCC who had their own theories and beliefs of how things should be happening. And there was no common goal among the group. And I think the one thing that Chad has worked with our new coordinator is, how do we develop a common goal so that everybody participating will agree? It's not just to get people counseling, but rather it's to reduce the meth issue. So I do think the CJCC is going in the right direction. I think the involvement and presentations to committees will be helpful. Keep us on track to make sure we're producing.
And I will say, important of note is the sheriff is the chair of the CJCC committee. So, we also have, besides having Jay as a voice, we also have the sheriff as the chair of the voice. Emily is actually the vice chair of the committee now. So all those outside groups, they have a clear voice from the county.
And it is a direct connection between the county board and our entire judicial system, including the district attorney and the courts and everyone over there is all connected. Probation and parole, everything is connected through CJCC, keeping everybody apprised of what's happening with meth and other problems that we have in law enforcement. The sheriff, of course, is very active, so as are the judges, district attorney's office. Everybody's involved. They got it pretty well covered through CJCC.
I think too, at least I would like to see, a couple of the committees maybe come up with, this is a lot bigger problem than Polk County. Again, I would like to see a resolution or two go to the counties association, asking the counties association to lobby the legislature for more money for whatever it might be that Health and Human Services Committee, Public Safety, whoever would like to see, and just put it out there again that this is what Polk County is looking to the Counties Association to adopt, to go try and get not just Polk County, but every county more money to combat that, or whatever. If it's money, if it's whatever it is, usually it ends up being money. But trying to get the Counties Association to lobby for those things that we need and other counties need at the legislature, because that's where the money comes from at the end of the day, and that's where real change can be affected.
Roads and drugs are our number one legislative direction.
Chair, when do we have to have resolutions that, and this may go to John or Jay, but or someone else may know, when do we have to have those resolutions where we send them to the county? We did a couple last year, John, and they didn't make it through the process, but when does the county have to propose those resolutions for the Counties Association to lobby? There's a cutoff date for that, isn't there?
Yes, there is, and it is written in my last report. I'd have to look that up again. But I have five steering committees in the month of March, the 5th, 11th, I believe the 19th. I have in the clerk's office, I gave her a copy of each one of those agendas. And those 5 agendas are in the clerk's office, Chairman Nelson.
One of the problems we're going to have with trying to incorporate or to solicit the counties associations, every county's got a little different problem with meth. We're very high in meth alone here, but some counties don't have as serious of a problem. They're not as willing to assist us financially.
But they also have, if they don't have a big meth problem, they've got a big problem somewhere else with drugs more than likely, and it's going after all of them. To me, not just one, not specifically meth. It is for us probably, but as a whole, it's asking the state to do. To me, it would be asking the state to help us all do more with wherever our problem is.
Can I make a comment on that? Jay, and that's a great point. Our meth isn't Milwaukee's problem, but ironically, when Milwaukee had a heroin problem, that took all of the attention. So all the funding for drug enforcement was centered around heroin, which really we've been fortunate up here has not been a major problem. We have occasional heroin cases, but ironically, those other counties that attracts all that attention. We're kind of the forgotten north.
That is our big challenge. I believe St. Croix County has processed 18 heroin cases, and Sheriff Walk, I don't believe we processed any so far, have we?
Yeah, we have one in our garage right now. A seizure.
All right,
We're fortunate.
I think we're on a good track. I think just bringing it up, we're gonna get some movement, we're moving on it, but I think it's. We got a couple things here. We got a discussion on the potential centerpiece sports complex. We got something on the fairgrounds. So with our remaining time, because we are not going over, shall we have a discussion on the fairgrounds and then finish up with the sports complex? Or I'm afraid one may take the rest of the meeting.
I agree with that.
All right, so what's the status on the MOU agreement, the CUP creation with the fairgrounds, or does anyone know what's happening there? Comment on it?
Sure. Currently on the Fair CUP, it went to the City of St. Croix Falls Plan Commission on the 1st. They looked at it. I did find another document that the city had SEH look into the CUP for the city. This bonus this morning. So otherwise we'll be One of the things that lists in here is a condition, if they pass the CUP, be conditional upon the drainage on the fair sites that's here proposed. That would have to be looked at and approved by DNR through that. The reaction from the fair was they had good comments coming back from it, but they're waiting on public comment or a public hearing, which has not been scheduled yet. The recommendation at their plan commission, one of the things that was requested was a sound expert to be brought at the public hearing when they have it. And the other question was brought up if the county would contribute to the street improvements for Simonson Road, which would be impacted by increased traffic that is in the city's capital improvement plan list. And then the other note was from Ms. Larson and Ms. Swenson from the Fair Society, noting they're asking for one additional motorized event outside the fair, plus other uses of the site that would include concerts, circuses, and rodeos. So right now, it's kind of on hold their CUP until they have a public hearing. I checked the calendar this morning on their website, and that meeting has not been set yet.
I can give you an update on that. I talked to the mayor of St. Croix Falls, and the Fair Society had wrote a letter to the city saying that they were going to postpone their hearing. There was a hearing date set, and they've asked for it to be pulled. So that was direct comment, so I don't know why it's being pulled exactly.
The email back from the Fair Society's chair was basically, meeting went great, lots of questions asked of us, just waiting for the public hearing and them to make recommendations for the city council. That was a reply I got back from the president. So right now it's just kind of waiting on that public hearing.
Have they ever, so has the fair ever, we're still waiting for the Fair Society to get through the CUP process before we do a new MOU. Is that what is
Yes.
what is the process we're stuck in right now?
We're kind of waiting on the CUP so we can, to finish up on the MOU. So it covers everything in there. And at this point, I've asked Cedar to, they have ceased work on the project until we have further movement. Once the CUP is done.
And I don't think they've ever supplied us with a response to our MOU initial offering.
No, that's the other piece. We had, Malia Mo and I had 2 or 3 meetings with them, where we gave them the initial MOU reoffer and we discussed things, but we've never actually received a counter offer back in those negotiations. We've had things said, but never put the paper and sent back to us.
Anything else on fairgrounds? Let's see, there's another item here, I kind of missed it. It's discussion and possible action regarding the review process and policy on resolutions that have significant impact on staff time and department budget. Is that a policy that we're gonna write or that we want written for us to review?
I know that's been brought up by a supervisor, that, they felt like this was all brand new, that we were talking about staff impact. And, we've kept going back to the Dana Fry days where, we never needed a policy because Dana just says I can only do 1 ball at a time and I'm not working on that. And he just says I ain't working on it. Staff don't have time. And I think it was just to clean that up because that seems to be a little bit of a problem, like I brought up earlier, is there's supervisors that are asking for lots of things and it's taking a lot of staff time up, and do we need a policy? Or is it the administrator just has this, I think, and that's what it's there for, was just to clarify what is the process? Do we need to have a policy on it? I know there was discussion that Chad, you have to sign off on a resolution that says, is there a financial impact? But we've never really kind of said, you've never used to look at, okay, how much staff time does it take as is your role? It was always just done by the administrator. And we were kind of asking is there a reason that we should be saying before we have a resolution to approve, shouldn't the board realize what maybe a resolution impact would be? Let's say the CAFO thing comes back up. For example, we heard Supervisor Olson say it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars and lots of staff time. How does that get relayed to us when we're going to be voting on a resolution? Because I personally would like to know that instead of just saying, hey, yeah, this sounds good. Let's try to stop swine CAFOs from coming. What does it cost the county? And it's our job to tell the taxpayers, if we're going to pass resolutions like that, what's the impact? And I think that's kind of why it's there, but I don't know, maybe we don't need to do nothing about it.
I think we mentioned this, I don't know if it was general government or executive last time. The idea is, should we be aware of the administrative and staff costs associated with the policy? What it turned out to be as we started thinking about this is, well, we don't want to give our staff another study to do to add more work onto it, when in reality, I think this CAFO is a classic example. When you ask the question, what does the staff feel about continuing up along the lines of this CAFO policy? My job to relay that. And what I do is I talk to the staff and we assess, is this something we can do? Sometimes we say, let's just do it. If it's something that's going to be significant, take a lot of time, I might say, okay, Bob, who can we afford to take off their current job description and assign to this project? And then I can relay that to the relevant committee to say there is a cost to this. If you want a policy, Chad does the financial analysis, and he'll just make a quick, brief statement. One thought is I could give a quick, brief statement on administrative time. That was just one suggestion. Have a little box to say low, medium, or high. On the other hand, I think it's probably better to just communicate with the appropriate committee or with the board. If we do this, here's the type of work and time commitment it will take. So that's just my opinion. Otherwise, you're getting a bureaucratic ladder we're going to have to climb every policy. Anytime somebody disagrees with the policy, they're going to say, I want to see the administrative cost of that.
I think, even back to the CAFO thing on the side of environmental services, what ended up happening is Jason was spending and zoning staff was spending so much time on the CAFO ordinance that we had, I think the number was in the neighborhood of 150, 120, 150 permits sitting on Jason's desk waiting to be approved because he didn't realistically have time to do his job. Because he was, being pulled in other directions. You can say it was all his job, but there's still only so many hours in a day. And realistically, what we hire him for on a day-to-day basis had to be put aside. And that's just the example. It could happen in any department, anywhere. But do we want to know if those types of things are going to happen?
I personally feel like we do. I'm in the construction business, so I know what it's like to go into zoning. And in their system, they had well over 100 backlog permits last year. So why did we allow, and this goes back to administrator, really, right? Because at the time, no one told us, hey, we're going to spend $50,000 to $100,000 worth of staff time on CAFO when we pass the resolution for the moratorium that we're gonna work on this. We wanna get a handle on this swine CAFO thing. We don't want swine CAFOs coming here without any process. We wanted to, but no one told us, hey, you know what, there's a good chance permits are gonna get backed up for a month or two. You know, you call their telephone over in zoning and they say, well, we won't get back to you for X amount of days. They cleaned up the backload now, but clearly, I mean, the public was waiting on services that they expect. And the only reason they got so far behind was the CAFO issue. And there is the example where you'd say, if that workload is going to be that big, we should have outsourced some of this CAFO issue, or we should have given support. Now, we did put a new position, we funded a new position there, but that's, I think, as a board member, I want to know up front before I'm voting on a resolution, what is the impact of staff? Do we really have the staff to do it? Or should it be outsourced? And, you know, maybe you don't need a policy and maybe it's just, you know, letting the administrator know, hey, we want to know that, or Chad, you know, we want to know that. I mean, we can just say we want to know that, or.
Well, I think there's two different questions. There's, you know, you can draw up an RFP and, you know, we could draw up an RFP to do a study, but then if you did a resolution to do some kind of study, then it'd be the financial impact of, okay, we got our proposals back. This is how much the study would cost. This would be the budget impact. So I think it's two different things there too. Like if you used an outside source, then that's where you'd look at the fiscal impact. Because right now what Vince is just talking about is what we can fit in our workload and what we can't in-house. And I think that's kind of.
Clearly you guys couldn't fit that in your workload. That's my point.
Right.
We did that and it did not fit into the workload. Something gets dropped. I don't care whose job you have. We know what happens when you get too much work on you.
And if it hadn't been dropped, we'd still be looking at the conditional use permit, because Jason wouldn't have been
Right.
close to with it yet. Had he done his everyday job of permits and then said, okay, I got 25 minutes today at the end of the day to work on CAFOs. You know, so something that big, whatever it is, just gobbles up an awful lot of staff time away from what they're supposed to do every day. See, I don't know that it's a policy thing. Like Chris said, it might be the administrator or whoever just saying, yep, we're going to realize it's going to take, you know, instead of it taking 3 months for the staff to get it done, it might take 1.5 years for the staff to get it done.
All right, well, we're gonna leave it there then. We're not gonna go forward with developing any policy or anything at this time. And that is actually going to bring us to the close. I seen the updated discussion regarding the concept for potential centerpiece sports ag complex. It's also on general government. So anyone that is interested in that will get it, the presentation there, not here and there. With our time. Do we need to do anything? We need to review our work plan, or is that pretty much in order? Any subject matters that we want to keep on for next month's agenda?
Was the ethics policy coming back to us potentially?
Yeah, ethics policy, and we should, I don't know, I mean, if we get an update on the map, just make sure that it's happening, that it's getting into committees, that the presentations are being done, and that it's moving.
Yeah, I don't think we need that on our work plan any longer. We've got our update. Committees are going to take care of it.
And you'll get it again in June.
All right, let's get adjourned before.
I'll have an update. I'll have an update on the Wisconsin County Steering Committee.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second it.
All in favor?
I
Get adjourned at, we're gonna say 9:59, just,
9:59:45. Congratulations.